Welcome back to Water's World. Fake news, in the tank news, and real news. That's the subject of tonight's Water's Words. Americans are confused, and rightfully so, about the Obama administration allegedly wiretapping Trump Tower because we don't believe what the media tells us anymore. Here's an example why. On January 20th, the New York Times published a headline that read, quote, "Wiretap data used in inquiry of Trump aides." Reporter Michael Schmidt writes that U.S. law enforcement and intelligence agencies are examining intercepted communications as part of an investigation into possible links between Russia and Trump associates, and that the wiretap communications have been provided to the Obama White House. So, the New York Times reports the Obama White House knew there were people wiretapping Trump world? Sounds almost exactly what President Donald Trump tweeted about, right? But after the Trump tweet, on March 4th, here is now the New York Times headline, as it appears. Trump offering no evidence, says Obama tapped his phones. The headline was written by the exact same writer, Michael Schmidt. No evidence? People look at the headlines and wonder, is the New York Times not a good enough source? Unbelievable. And how about this hoax? On November 15th, a woman in Michigan reported to police that she was attacked by a man who scratched her in the face. She claimed it was a hate crime following the election of Donald Trump. But it turns out the entire story was fabricated. She scratched her own self in the face. She was depressed and made up the entire story. Now for some in-the-tank news. And just so you know, the next 4, possibly 8 years will be eye-opening because Water's World will be able to perfectly show the media double standard, how it covers the exact same thing differently. Example 1. A Republican congressman, Jason Chaffetz, received massive negative press when he said this about the new Republican health care bill.
Americans have choices, and they've got to make a choice. And so maybe rather than getting that new iPhone that they just love and they want to go spend hundreds of dollars on that, maybe they should invest in their own health care.
The congressman received wall-to-wall coverage on cable networks for this so-called insensitive gaffe. But wait a second. I remember another politician saying the exact same thing and receiving zero negative press attention. Roll the tape.
What I would say is if you looked at that person's budget and you looked at their cable bill, their telephone, their cell phone bill, other things that they're spending on, it may turn out that it's just they haven't prioritized health care because right now everybody's healthy. Nobody actually wants to spend money on health insurance.
He said the exact same thing, but when a Republican says it, it's a gaffe. Example 2. Ben Carson said this a few days ago.
That's what America is about. A land of dreams and opportunity. There were other immigrants who came here in the bottom of slave ships, worked even longer, even harder for less.
Immigrants or slaves? This soundbite was the lead story on many liberal shows. It was called a gaffe, racially charged, and historically inaccurate. But guess who else said the exact same thing?
Certainly it wasn't easy for those of African heritage who had not come here voluntarily, and yet in their own way were immigrants themselves.
So you see, there's a different standard when Democrats say something because the press is in the tank. Now, for the real news this week. Things you may not have heard about much because you've been overwhelmed with fake news and hoaxes. Illegal border crossings down 40% in Trump's first month in office. That's way more than the 10 to 20% Homeland Security usually sees this time of year. Good news, right? And then there's this. Big-time gains for American jobs and wages so far under President Trump. 235,000 jobs were added in the month of February, following 238,000 jobs added in January, the best back-to-back rise since July. President Trump will be judged on his performance in office, so keep these numbers in mind. Speaking of big numbers, remember how department stores were dropping Ivanka Trump's line due to low performance? Well, since then, her clothing sales increased 346%. Does that sound like low performance to you? I don't think so. And here's a story that the mainstream media completely buried. Remember how the IRS was caught targeting the Tea Party under President Obama, and all of a sudden they lost or destroyed mountains of evidence? Well, 2 years later, the IRS curiously located 7,000 documents. But again, not a smidgen of corruption there, right? Of course not. And we still have no timeline for when these documents are going to be released. Ridiculous. So the bottom line is the media continues to complain that Americans don't trust them anymore. Well, I think these examples I just showed are just the reasons why. So until the media reports fairly, accurately, corrects the record, and stops burying positive news for Donald Trump, trust in the press will continue to erode. But you can always trust Waters' words to tell you the truth. And joining me now, someone who always tells it like it is, former Arkansas governor and Fox News contributor Mike Huckabee. So, Mike, tell me, what'd you think of the memo I just laid out?
Well, Jesse, I am so disappointed in you. I always liked you, but I'm disappointed. You're such a cynic. How dare you think that the media is covering Donald Trump differently than they covered Barack Obama? I mean, where would you get such a notion like that,
What's
Jesse?
What's gotten into me? I don't know. They must be pumping some fumes into the studio over here.
Something has happened to you, my friend. Look, let's face it, the media hates Donald Trump almost as much as they loved Obama, and they love themselves some Obama. And so for 8 years, we've had them slobbering all over themselves, and he could do no wrong. Now we have a president who actually was elected by a lot of the people that have been snubbed and held in contempt and spoken to in condescending tones by the national media. And they elect Donald Trump, and the media still can't figure out how totally disgusted most of America is with their bias and their sense of privilege and their sense of complete inaccurate reporting. They're just sick of it.
I want to show you something else. Jorge Ramos, one of your best friends, Governor, said this
we're tight.
On Tucker Carlson's show the other day. Roll the tape.
Many people who support Donald Trump, they think it is their country, that it is a white country, and they are absolutely wrong. This is not a white country. This is not their country. It is ours.
Ooh, it is our country. What did you make of that, Governor?
It's a racist statement, pure and simple. Think about this for a moment. He says it's our country. It's not a white country. No, it isn't a white country. It's a country that is made up of people who are white and brown and black and red and yellow. It's not a color country. It's a country of people who commit to living under the social contract of the Constitution and living in a land of freedom. It has nothing to do with anybody's color. And when Jorge Ramos says something like that, it is a statement of racism. Mm-hmm. And if anybody like me had said that, and if I had said, it's a white country, and we're going to have to get used to it.
I wouldn't be allowed
you
to
would never
have you...
Get, well, first of all, I would never be on TV again, ever.
You'd be banned forever. I mean, I'd have to help you pack your bags. I don't know why he understands what Trump voters are thinking, what gives him ESP, because I think Trump voters are saying it's not a white country, it's a country of legal citizens, not illegal immigrants. That's the point. And what also bothers me is when someone like Jorge Ramos says this country should be a melting pot, and then 5 seconds later says, you know what, actually it's my pot. You can't have it both ways.
Well, the whole idea of America as being a melting pot is that the flavors are blended together. That's what that means, a melting pot. We melt into one country. E pluribus unum, out of many, one. What he's describing is out of one, many. Mm-hmm. Let's go ahead and separate everybody into individual racial silos and cultural silos, and that is not what America is. Look, America is a great country because of the immigrants who have come here and have brought their unique understanding, but the one thing they always brought was a desire to assimilate into this country, embrace it as their own, and to be American. And American doesn't mean you're white, it doesn't mean you're black, it doesn't mean you're any particular color. It means that you love the idea that you're going to be held by your own personal responsibility and standards, not simply being put in with some group and you can't get any higher, and you are always going to be as low as whatever group you're in. That defies the very essence of this wonderful experiment in government called America. I wish Jorge understood that.
Well, he doesn't. And last point, I think we all bleed red. Thank you very much, Governor. Appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Jesse.
Up next, a real American panel assesses President Trump's first 50 days. Wait until you see these grades. And later, New Yorkers tell me if they believe in America first. Do you agree with America first?
No, man, it's humanity first.